Hopefully this phone stays put. I keep putting it on tripod. You guys see those free t-shirts downstairs?
For what?
I don't know, I didn't even look at it.
There should be what?
Free t-shirts?
Oh.
If you see me, they show you.
I like the phone.
I guess it's a leftover 2020 t-shirts from the Student Volunteer Center. And it has toilet paper for zeros.
Yeah, that's not for a reason. Professor, it's looking like I can't upload it because it was locked on November 2nd. So
Yeah, just email it to me. Yeah. I like that dress. Cool.
Thank you.
Very Miss Frizzle.
Yeah, my grandma made it for me. I have a presentation about books today, so
That's cool.
I felt like it was fitting.
I like the shoes too. You got a whole fit going on. I like it. A sick fit. So noisy. We're gonna move on to new stuff. Exciting. Very, very exciting. Greetings.
I got I turned in last night.
Cool. That's
thanks,
good.
Thanks again for that little bit of grace period.
Yeah, of course, no problem. Did everything go okay? Like, tests and everything?
I think so. I mean, this class is not, I'm not suited exactly for the type of class, but no, I think it'll be
Good.
well, for this.
Good, okay. That's all we can hope for.
Yes, sir.
like, is it very gross? Oh. No, that's Jane Eyre. Oh. Yeah. I really just don't believe it. It's so distraught. That's if it did.
That's cool.
Thanks. I have a presentation about books in my class today, and so I just felt like this was fitting.
When did your grandma make that for you?
Probably like 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did she make it for this presentation?
No, it was just some fabric I found. Her and my grandpa live with us. They're 89 years old. But let me tell you, she's probably made like 30 dresses since she's moved in with us. Like I have a Dalmatian one. Like I have some random ones.
Man, that's awesome.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know how she does it, but
I wish I could do something like that.
that sounds like a good retirement. I know, yeah, she makes so many. And there's like 3 of us. I have 2 other sisters, and so she makes it for all 3 of us.
That's cool.
Honestly, if she opened an Etsy, those would,
Yeah.
like,
Dude, I've had a couple of my sorority sisters like ask me if they send her fabric, will she do it? And she's like, no. she tells me, she's like, no.
Only for family.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's later, it's limited edition.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
yeah, it's special.
Did you know you get this email? I think it's fake.
Yeah, I keep getting those. It's
Where's Bernard today?
Yeah, you want to put them up on the left-hand side over there?
Yes.
we need his encouragement.
Right, exactly.
I was in a classroom building room until like midnight the other day, and I had Bernard on the board. And when me and my friend left, we just decided not to erase him.
That's good. I mean, he has to stay. He has to watch over everybody that comes in.
So yeah, whoever had that classroom the next day, that was the first thing.
That's awesome. Bernard is ever present.
Someone drew bullet on the whiteboard in my chem lecture.
Was it good or was it bad?
It was awesome.
Really?
Yeah, and it was actually on a chalkboard. So this giant chalkboard bullet. And
Yeah.
I was like, an art student came in here.
That's cool. That's awesome. I wish I could draw.
My best friend, like, if she thinks of something, like, she can draw it. Like, she can take what's in her mind and, like, draw it. And I've been so jealous of that.
Yeah. Drawing's a cool skill. Yeah, I'd love to be able to draw or paint. I've never taken. Oh, he is. He's looking fancy.
Is he a business major?
No, he just likes looking dapper.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's funny. Let me see. I am getting observed today. Let me see if the professor observing me is lost.
Does that mean we're also?
Yeah,
I'm like, do we have to have good behavior?
Oh, that would be someone natural.
Please.
All right, good
Does that
sign.
mean you can't have as much fun as normal?
Yeah, do we, I just asked, do we have to
tone
have,
it down?
we have to
No,
have good behavior?
no, of course not. I mean, you guys are always on good behavior.
So I'm hearing we need to try to get you fired.
That's fine by
Hearing
me.
heckling is allowed.
Yes.
Can you get fired from a job that's not really a permanent job? I don't know. Yeah. Go ahead, do your worst. I had nothing to
Don't
do.
you tempt us with that.
Yeah. Well, let's get started then. I'll probably miss the first few minutes. Maybe you forgot. We'll see. And make sure I told them the right place. That would be pretty funny.
There were a bunch of people going into exam room 2 that you get back to you heard. What a case
Yeah. Let me make sure.
As long as A class gets observed.
As long as he observes something. As long as he does not go blind.
Like, slowly losing her sight, but that's here.
I'm just losing my theory, because my mom is like, she's not like that, so like, she's still trying to yell at me. Because they'll be like, hey mom, what were you doing? And she's like, what? I'm like, mom.
My poor.
Oh my god, I screwed up. I told him the wrong one.
If I get 3,
Mine was like 40 minutes. I did 2 columns.
Yeah. I did.
I never did 2 columns.
Yeah.
Because your dad probably been stuck in the process, like, since yesterday.
Yeah.
Literally, like last week, they were like, my cousin and my mom were probably part of tonight, sorry. And I was like, oh, no, oh, you like that weird. Wait, you check it out?
All right.
I typed it out.
Wow, that's so fancy. It looks really nice.
Yeah, it makes it like easier for my
Mine
brain.
looks.
I feel like I'd take this. So. Oh, I like put my pictures into like a PDF converter.
There's a website called Small PDF, and then you upload files and then you can make them.
That's fun. I just take a picture of it on my phone and then email it to myself.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
copy and paste the pictures.
Very legit.
All right, well, Dr. Rytan, if you're watching this, which I just sent him the link, I am sorry, I told you the wrong room. But let's get started. Well, you either run across campus or don't know where you are. Okay, bad start. So, okay, congratulate yourselves, because like you now know, like we've completed the propositional deductive logic section. So you actually know a new language. Yay! Hey, great. You are now in a place, if you've kept up with class, if you've turned everything in, where you can use propositional logic to form arguments, to make inferences, right? To model your thoughts when, you know, your thoughts are deductive. Like, most people don't ever learn this. So great, good job, everybody. But what does it really count for?
Bragging points.
Bragging points, right? How does it help us be better thinkers? What has deductive reasoning given us in this propositional logic we've
Giving us like a step-by-step way to confirm like whether or not our own like thoughts and arguments are valid and sound.
Good, yeah, it's giving you a step-by-step way to confirm with inference, right? Step-by-step inference, a way of very clearly thinking of in a linear way, right? Step-by-step. What else?
I think all the rules have shown us what things we can avoid when we make arguments. Like, now we know to avoid confirming the consequent or denying the antecedent.
Exactly. So by learning these 18 rules of good ways of inferring, you now know, can kind of get a feel, and when you combine it with the truth tables and a general understanding, you can now see why a lot of fallacies are fallacies, right? Why affirming affirming the consequent is a fallacy, right? Why denying the antecedent is a fallacy. And I didn't have to directly teach you all these fallacies. Once you learn how to think correctly, you kind of get a feel for bad reasoning, right? Yeah. Okay, so we've got clear thinking, step-by-step processes that make our thoughts more clear, right? We have a way of interpreting arguments from our peers and people around us, putting them into that deductive form when it applies, when it's actually deductive, and evaluating it, right? Good, that's really helpful. That's a really helpful core building block, right? Does that tell you how to basically inquire into the truth and learn the truth?
No.
Nope. Did it tell you anything about how to tell whether a proposition is true or false?
No.
Not really. I mean, kind of, in that if this proposition's true, then this proposition can't be true. I know this one's true, so that one can't be true. But it doesn't tell you how to, in the first place, what you start with, right? It doesn't tell you how do I tell when something's true or false in the first place. It assumes you can kind of already do that. And it gives you these hypothetical logical relationships. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very limited. It's very powerful, but it's very limited. So we have, I want to make sure my camera is set up in the right angle. Yep. We have deduction or deductive inference. And we've learned a little bit about induction or inductive inference. right? Certainty or logical necessity, probability. But so far, we've actually really only learned, again, about deductive inference and inductive inference. What is an inference?
It's the connection between like your premises and a conclusion.
Yeah, it's a connection, maybe, or it's the act of, I have these mental contents, these propositions, or these ideas, or these facts, and I infer from them something else. Now we can infer it with certainty, or we can infer it with probability, right? But think about what that means. These are all step-by-step, little steps at a time. How do you develop a philosophical theory just from these steps? How do you develop an ethical theory? How do you develop a scientific theory? Essentially, if these were only two ways of reasoning, if this was it, this is the only tools we had in our toolkit as thinkers, then how would you ever actually make very much progress in science? Because if we just had to basically construct scientific theories based on a step-by-step-by-step basis, we haven't had that much time. Think of how long it would take to go step after deductive argument to get to some theory of physics, right? You really think that's how it works? If that's how it works, then how do we explain technological advances that go boom? How do we explain that for the vast majority of human existence we didn't have phones and televisions, and all of a sudden within my lifetime we have cell phones and televisions and all of us have this technology? So that all of this, there was science for a long time, thousands of years of science, thousands of years of inquiry, and then all of a sudden you have a technological explosion. Does that sound like the result of a step-by-step process that goes in baby steps? No. So arguments and inference clearly cannot explain or give us the tools that we need to actually engage in research, a research program, or even just to figure out what we believe. They help us manage the fine details, and they are the mechanism by which we test things, by which we kind of check our thoughts, to make probable. And then I test that hypothesis. But the actual process of inquiry is big, and it's messy, and it's a process, right? It isn't just reducible to deductive and inductive arguments or inductive and deductive inferences. It's something different. What is that something? I don't have ideas. If these are just part of the toolkit, what is the big thing called inquiry, and how is it done?
I don't know, but that's what you're here to teach us about.
That is what I'm going to teach you about, yeah. I'm here to give you a model of inquiry, right? Of inquiry, however you want to say it. But what is it? What even is inquiry? I mean, we do it all the time. Raise your hand if you believe in something. Raise your hand if you believe in that something on the basis of evidence. Okay. You believe it because you did a deductive or inductive argument? Are all of your beliefs established in this way? What about something like God, the existence of God? Do you have a single deductive argument or inductive argument for the existence of God? Maybe you have some, but don't you have to combine all these different arguments and then weigh the overall probability of the hypothesis God exists? How do you do that? Did I teach you that? I've taught you about inductive and deductive arguments though, right? But I haven't even taught you how to do something that important. And that's kind of the limitation of a class like this, is typically this class is taught, it does not go beyond these two things. It focuses on this, it gives you a very shallow understanding of this, of inductive inference, and that's it. So when you go into your daily life, and you, world pandemic hits, and you find yourself sorting through all this information and all these different arguments on Facebook, and you see that your mom, your grandma, and your uncle are posting what seems to be real information about how the vaccines will kill you, and then your friends are posting information about how those people are stupid, how do you sift through that? How do you weigh the arguments against each other? You'll never have knocked down proof for either side, so how do you do it? Right? Let's learn that. Let's talk about how that actually works. Clearly, it is not going to be through direct, small, little baby step arguments. Make sense? Okay, questions? No. Suggestions? Any comments? How do you pronounce it? Inquiry or inquiry?
I never say inquiry, but
Inquiry. Okay. I mean, it makes sense either way. I think most Americans probably say inquiry, right?
I think it's one of those things like caramel or caramel. Like it
Right.
kind of depends on where it's placed in the sentence for me.
Yeah. A lot of people I learned about this stuff from are British and old people, and they often say things like inquiry.
Yeah.
Or mispronounce it. I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to butcher it this whole class. That's fine. Because I go between the pronunciations. Okay, so what is inquiry? Can anybody give me a definition? Like, what is it to inquire?
Ask questions.
To ask questions. What type of questions?
About the truth.
About the truth. Okay. I'm seeing if Dr. Wright can email me back. We'll see. Oh man. Okay, so yeah. So it's asking questions about the truth, right?
Define the truth.
Yeah.
To find the truth? Okay.
Because an inquiry is an activity, as you put it.
Activity.
As I put it, oh, I see people have done the reading, okay. I'm going to define inquiry like this, and this might be philosophically problematic. So my co-author on this reading is a pragmatist, and he doesn't have the same sense of truth as I do. Or as a lot of us might naively have, where truth is correspondence between, our propositions and beliefs and reality. He kind of doesn't really think that that's possible to have. So his version of inquiry might redefine truth, and that might have some serious implications for everything we say here. So I'm going to talk about inquiry from the paradigm I come from, and the paradigm I think most of us essentially most of us from Aristotle to the 18th, 19th century have, which is this kind of rationalistic, there is a truth out there, we can apprehend the truth, probability can help us get to what's likely to be the truth or approximate the truth, right? I'm going to leave the notion of truth undefined because it's really complicated what truth is. But we're kind of operating within that paradigm. It might be the case that everything I say here, because our notion of truth doesn't end up having any meaning or doesn't end up being philosophically sustainable or coherent, everything I say here might fall apart. And so the foundation of this view of inquiry, or inquiry, which it seems to be the foundation of scientific inquiry, at least until very recently, relies on an intuitive notion of truth, something like truth as what is most rational to believe, or truth as, what is really an accurate model or representation of the world. But there are different... Richard Rorty's terms, truth is what your colleagues will let you get away with saying. Right? That has nothing to do with how reality really is, right? Okay, so just that little preface, this is coming from a particular background, a particular tradition, a tradition I think is true and accurate and good to have, but it might not be the only one. And everything I say here, if you ask a pragmatist philosopher, and if you take a class in pragmatism, they may have a completely different system of inquiry, of what a theory is, of how to confirm or disconfirm it. But this is the pretty standard view among non-pragmatists. Does that make sense? Okay. And I think it's pretty, at the very least, the pragmatists will say, this system is useful and is reliable. even if it's not exactly right. Okay, so inquiry. It's a process of what? Of seeking truth. I'll put truth in all caps. Via or through question asking and answering. All right. Question asking and answering. What's that mean? What is it to ask a question and seek an answer?
It's just like searching. You're just curious, and so you're trying to figure out.
Yeah, searching, solving this little mystery in your head. Okay, what are you searching for? Okay, we can say truth or an answer, a true answer. However you want to slice it up, don't care. But what makes you ask the question? When you're inquiring about something, what is the question asking part? Someone just give me an example of when you start to inquire about some topic. What prompts you to ask a question? And then what sorts of questions are you asking?
I think like my natural curiosity generally makes me ask the question.
Curiosity about what?
Like just like how.
What I'm thinking is like inductive, it doesn't pertain to deductive as much.
It could include deductive, right? Say I want to know why 2 plus 2 equals 4. Strictly deductive. But you're right. You're asking, let's just say the type of questions we're asking is how, why, right? We can, if we're philosophers are not, physics and the natural sciences ask this type of question, but philosophers really boil it down to the most fundamental question of like, what is X? What is it to be X? What is a dog? What is a cat? Is there a unified nature there? So we can ask things like, what is this thing that I am seeing? What is this thing that I'm experiencing? What is its true nature or essence? We can also ask how or why things happen, or why things are true, right? And these all are kind of unified by the sense of reasons why, right? When we ask a question, we are asking for the reasons why. Eyes closed, not observing anything? Now, what makes you start asking these questions?
You see something questionable.
See something questionable, or you see something that surprises you, or you see something that puzzles you, right?
So any observation, right?
You could be puzzled by any observation, but typically we're not, right? Are you puzzled by the fact that you're sitting in that chair right now?
No.
When I point it out, and I say, why are you sitting in that chair? And not the one next to you, right? So you can be puzzled and ask and inquire into anything, ask for the reasons why, about pretty much anything. But it's typically these observations or experiences we have that puzzle us in some way, right? So I'm going to say it like this. The question asking part of inquiry is we are beings, material animals in this world having experiences. Even if the subject of our inquiry is not material, it's not about the physical observable world, it starts there. Everything starts from observation. And from observation, you eventually run into an experience that puzzles you, that kind of weirds you out, that makes you uncomfortable, and you want to understand it. And I'm just going to call it a puzzling event or observation. So you got this puzzling event or observation, you observe, you see something puzzling, and you start asking questions. Reasons why. How did that thing happen? Why did that thing that just puzzled me happen? You want to understand it, right? You want to know, sometimes, like, what is that thing? And that could be something as simple as, how does this thing appear in experience to us? Or it could be something more philosophical, like, what is the true nature of this chair outside of us, in reality, not just as we experience it as humans? Right? Does that make sense? So you ask these sorts of questions.
I'm not sure that it does make sense. Like, with the nature of the chair, like if we weren't observing it?
Yeah, like how it is in itself, right? Imagine you put on a pair of glasses, right, and they're rose-colored, right? Like literally, I'm not using it as a metaphor, I mean literally like rose-colored. The world to you, right, suddenly looks rose-colored, changes the color. You take them off, the color changes again. Which one's the true one? Way of thinking about the world and experiencing it.
I think without the rose glasses, because that changes.
Right. I take a hammer, I hit you in a certain part of your head, you're now colorblind. Which one's the true one? The way you're experiencing.
I'd still say the way I'm experiencing now, but
why? Because all of us, it's not even necessarily the case that all of us have exactly the same perceptual faculties and sense organs. So we might not even all be seeing the same world. So why is it just your way of seeing the world is right? Is an accurate representation of how it actually is?
because I'm arrogant.
Back
I don't think it's arrogant, it's just you never thought about it, right?
Well, that can kind of be backed up by science and the science of wavelengths and color.
Sure,
But
science
just
is
say
like
that
the
we
way.
perceive everything the same way. Like, I could say that, like, Chris is wearing a blue jacket, right? And to me, that color is blue, and it looks like the color blue, but if I were to transfer my, like, consciousness into your mind, it might actually look green, but because you see it the same way every day, and it's called blue to you, you see it as blue, but to me, I might see it as green or orange or whatever.
Okay, great. So you might have a scientific explanation that shows even if we perceive it in a different way, we can kind of get to a place where we use certain methods to observe things all in the same way. Eventually, right? Like using the scientific method maybe, and scientific explanations, we can kind of start considering, yeah, we don't see this all the same exact color, but there are wavelengths of light, right? That could explain why you see it one way, you see it another way, and what we share there is real. Well, all science proceeds from observation. All scientific theories use human concepts. Wavelengths are human concepts. Based on what? First you see the waves crashing on the ocean, and you get this metaphorical image of something undulating, right? And then you suddenly start positing these black box entities called wavelengths of light, using the human concept based on human experience. How do we know those concepts are the exact right concepts that reflect and represent reality? Can science answer that? No, because science will always be based on observation of human concepts. So at the end of the day, science is stuck within the human realm. Now maybe the human realm, we've evolved, or maybe God has given us the faculties to where the human realm and way of conceptualizing things is pretty accurate. That might be the case. And then you'd be a scientific realist, right? But is it necessarily the case? It's possible that none of the external world even exists. It's only me, in my mind, and you're all fake. Or it's possible that we all exist, but we're just disembodied minds hallucinating this together. Right? Can science say anything about this? No, not really. It can never really solve these fundamental philosophical questions. So the point is, when we ask things like, what is X? We can be asking something simple as the scientific question, how is X composed? Right? So it's like, what type of molecules combine in what ways to give rise to this dog? How is the dog made? Right? What's it made of? How does that work? But then there's deeper, even philosophical questions under what is X, and what is the real reality of X? What is the dog? Is the dog a real thing, or is that just how we experience a clump of atoms moving together? Right? Those sorts of things. Okay, let's not get too hung up on that. But it's to show you that when we ask these sorts of questions, there's a lot of different things we mean. Right? Make sense? Depending on what sort of discipline you're in, what exactly these questions mean might change. If you're in ethics and you ask, why is it true that human life is valuable? Are you going to give me an atomistic physical explanation of that? Probably not. What would that even mean? How would the physical world make something valuable? Are you going to give me a psychological explanation? Maybe. Are you going to give me a meta-ethical explanation about we just do have some reasons to value human life? Right? So all of these questions, they start in observation of the physical world, empirical experience, and the puzzling event we find in experience, or it's a weird idea that we get from experience, and then we start asking questions, and those questions can explode and branch off in a million directions. And that's kind of how, even though inquiry, even though things start in this material world because they are material objects, they end up and can end up in this speculative realm, ultimately of like philosophy and theology. Does that make sense? Weird. Okay, so if we got kind of the process, I think we now understand what it means to ask a question somewhat. But what about the answering part? Because this is all just hypothetical. This is all just, what is it? How do we actually come up with answers to those sorts of questions? Anybody read the book? Anybody know what I call and what is typically called this answering process?
Is that like the explanation and prediction thing?
Yes, what's the broad category those fall under?
Theory.
Theory, right. So theory in our culture has a really bad name. When you hear somebody like, you're just too involved in theory. You know what I mean? You're involved in too speculative stuff, right? But theory really does not have to have that connotation. All theory really is an attempt or a particular way of answering one of these types of questions. Of seeking the truth by giving what you hope is a true answer or a probable answer. Right? So it might be more accurate, instead of talking about theory, to talk about the process of theorization, right? Which is the process of coming up with answers. Now, I ask you, if you have all of these different questions, and especially this question and this question, have very different possible meanings depending on what the subject matter is, right? Do you think that all the answers are going to look the exact same? So do you think the methods of theorization are going to be the same? Probably not. That's why physicists have their method, philosophers have theirs. Ethicists have certain methods, and historians have certain methods, right? Because they're asking different questions about different subjects and looking for different types of answers. I think the strength of this class, if we get this through our heads, hopefully this ends up being true. But I follow a tradition of people who think that actually at the end of the day, the subject matter changes, but there's really only one method for all of us, across all disciplines, all time. The subject matter changes, but actually how we answer these questions is a fundamental core that's universal to all human inquiry. At least all good human inquiry that's not just bullshit. I'll save that to the end of what we cover over the next few weeks, because that's kind of like the promissory note, but it's complicated. Okay, so we got theorization, which is a process of giving these sorts of answers to these sorts of questions. The two broad camps theorization reduces to is explanation or explanatory theories and prediction. Now, of course, as we've learned in the logic class, language is a bit arbitrary. There's different ways of using all of these words. So I'm giving a particular account of certain uses of all of these words. So in pop culture, in normal life, theorization or theory, when I say I have a theory, tomorrow it's going to rain, That makes sense to you, right? That's a proper use of the word theory. That's a prediction. A theory can be a type of prediction. I have a theory. 5,000 years ago, a swallow swallowed a pebble. That's a prediction as well into the past. I have a theory. Right now, one of you is silently farting, and none of us know. Probably is actually true. Unaware to you. Looking at you. Someone. I won't say that out. Probably don't. Those are predictions about something unobservable that's going on, right? Past, present, future. The point is that predictions are about something unobservable, and it's okay, it makes sense to call those types of predictions theories, right? There's other types of theories, though. Explanatory theories. What is an explanatory theory?
It tries to explain.
It tries to explain, right? What is it to give an explanation of something? Don't just quote the book, I want common language.
You have something, you have some conclusion or something that happened or like something that you, like whatever truth or whatever, and then you say these are the reasons why, at least that I think that this is true or this is the thing that's happening.
Right. In these types of questions, you get, and I mean, I guess some of these questions, you've got the reasons why questions, and then you have things like what will, or did, or is happening, or is true, right? And I guess you could call this, just prediction in general. But, yeah, explanation is generally trying to give the reasons why something is the case. And again, what that involves might change in the subject matter. If I ask, why is it the case that, what's a good example? Why is it the case that my car doesn't start? That might have a very different type of explanation than why is it the case that in the United States, 50% of people are Republican or something, right? They're not going to have the same sort of explanation. But in general, explanation is an account, we could say, of or specifying reasons why. Okay. Somebody give me an example of an explanation. Take a puzzling event, pick something in front of you or anything you can think of, and give me like a brief sketch of an explanation.
Well, the one we've used before, your car doesn't start in the morning, and the explanation is rats chew through the wires.
Right, okay, good. You got the puzzling event, the car doesn't start. We've already seen a little bit of this. You got the puzzling event, the car doesn't start. And then you have a hypothesis or an explanation, some story that makes sense of why that car won't start, right? Okay. Somebody give me another one. Maybe something even more common or speculative, I don't care.
Why I chose to wear this jacket today because it was a little bit chilly outside, and also the only other sweatshirts I have are black, and I didn't want to do black on black.
Good. Now that's a story you just told about, tacitly it talks about your psychology, your taste, your aesthetic tastes, right? In matching colors and everything. And the weather maybe of like why you need to have a sweater on in the first place. And it says that story, when all the parts are taken together, gives the reasons why you're wearing that. Especially wearing that instead of something else, right? Good. Is that a complete explanation from the beginning of the universe till now? No. But it's still an explanation. It still tells you the reasons why. Even if we really wanted to understand everything that goes into you wearing that sweater, is beyond our understanding, right? Because you have to go back to the Big Bang, maybe, or something. It's still an explanation. Okay, good. So it's an account specifying reasons why. We can also call it a story specifying reasons why. And typically we say it's a story. We use these metaphorical things that sheds light on What does the metaphor sheds light on mean?
Like, it metaphorically sheds light on the subject, so like the subject was like dark or like unseen before, and now that there's light on it, you can see it and understand it better.
It
Good.
shows like the truth and it's
Yeah, it lets you understand so exactly, the metaphor is, well, I'm stumbling around in the darkness, confused and puzzled and don't really know anything. And it's dark and shadowy, and I kind of can see something, I kick it, and then I shine a flashlight or open a window, and the light comes in, and now I can see, oh, that's what that thing really is. I didn't know before. I could kind of feel my way around it, I could tell something's there, but until I shed some light on it, I can't really understand the truth about it, or what it really is, or how it really works.
and then you feel bad because you just kicked the dog.
Exactly, and then you just stepped on a dog and killed it, yeah. It's sad.
Oh,
Well, it was a small dog, and I'm a big man.
that doesn't make it better.
Well, I didn't mean to, but no one shed light on
That's a hypothetical defense.
Check that off the board.
Alright, so that's the general, notion, the intuitive notion of an explanation. Make sense to everybody? Now, whether it makes sense on a theoretical level, and you actually can explain exactly what all this means, that's a different issue, right? But on an intuitive level, where you could go about your day-to-day life, and if someone asked you to explain something, would you kind of get what they're saying? A little bit? Yeah. How philosophy normally works, especially analytic philosophy, which is what I'm trained in, is an attempt to analyze concepts. And normally we start with the concepts that normal people in normal life, including us, use. And then we try to make it clear exactly what we're talking about. So normally in analytic philosophy, you have to start somewhere. And you analyze it until it's clear. And then maybe at the end of analyzing it, you find it really didn't make sense anyway. So just get rid of it. Stop talking like that, right? So we've got to start with this kind of intuitive notion, shedding light on, or maybe even reasons why. Right? This is kind of metaphorical story that sheds light on. The more rigorous analytic thing is specifying reasons why. And the reason why reasons aren't necessarily a metaphor is because they seem to be irreducible, and I won't get into that. But if you want to read my research or the research of a lot of other people, it might be that reasons are actually a fundamental concept. A technical concept of fundamental. And you can't really give a definition or analysis of it. So I'm not using reasons why in some colloquial way. I'm saying, when I say reasons why, I'm talking about something more strange and fundamental and mysterious. Like when I say, why does this atom move like there? And I specify the reasons why. I can't exactly tell you what it means to be a reason for something. But I can tell you the reasons why I've used the concept. And that's a marker. When you can use something very well, but you're not actually sure what it means, that's a marker that maybe you're running up against a fundamental concept that doesn't have a real definition. But it's still a real concept. Okay, I digress. So I'm going to get rid of sheds light on. I think that's too metaphorical. We're going to talk about specifying reasons why for the rest of the time. Make sense? Kind of, maybe, somewhat. All right. Prediction. We've already kind of said what it is. It's way simpler. It's just trying to establish some fact or proposition. Again, facts and propositions aren't necessarily the same thing. The fact of the matter about how the world is can be described in a proposition, a sentence, but maybe even a sentence isn't the proposition like we've talked about all semester. Maybe it's something abstract. So I'm just going to keep it vague. I'm going to say facts, propositions, events, conditions, right? Could be a bunch of stuff. It's trying to establish something like that as probable. Or probably true. Now that doesn't have to involve an explanation of reasons why, right? Again, somebody just make a prediction. Give me an example of a prediction.
gonna snow tomorrow.
It's gonna snow tomorrow. Okay, good. Now, we probably know that's not a good prediction, right? A probable prediction. But if we can entertain it, it's going to snow tomorrow. Does that involve the reasons why?
His statement alone doesn't.
The statement alone doesn't, right? So, to make a prediction, maybe you don't have to have reasons why, but let's try to make it a good prediction. Let's say, why do you think it will snow tomorrow? The weatherman said so. Does that tell you the reasons why it's going to snow tomorrow?
It tells you the reasons why you believe that it's going to snow tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right, why you believe or why you should believe. Or why it's likely or probable, in a sense. But it does not tell you the reasons why. And that's okay, right? Now, how about this one? I come home, and my wife, the house is messy, and I go into the bedroom, and there's like a guy's clothes on the bed, and my wife tells me, it's not what it looks like. I can explain. And I say, I make a prediction, someone's going to run out of the closet right now. Right? Some guy, they're cheating on me. And I wait, no one comes out, I open the closet, no one's there. Right? The clothes might have been the reasons why I believed that, why I predicted. And it might be, in certain situations, it might be actually good evidence. If I see a bunch of guys' clothes I don't recognize on my bed, and I'm like, are they still here? That might be a good reason why I should believe it. But is it a reason why something's going to happen? Is it telling me the causes of that? No. So there's a division between explanation and prediction. Maybe that example wasn't very clear. But there's a division between explanation and prediction where you can predict things and show something's probably true, even if you're not telling me why it's true. Right? Explanations tell me why something's true, why something happens. Predictions tell me that something will probably happen, or that something is probably true or false. Right? Make sense? Now they have overlap. Do not think that these are exclusive, exhaustive categories. Because remember when we talked about the little man, the cat, again, I'm not going to draw this. The hieroglyph of, every time I draw it, it looks bad. It's getting better at least, right?
Those paws are a little sus. Yeah. Oh.
It's better than it was.
Oh, why isn't it just on its four legs? You just do oval four legs.
Because he's a cat dog.
It looks like a kangaroo.
I don't know what this guy's doing, but we've seen the Egyptian hieroglyph, we've covered this before, and it's a little Egyptian man bowing before a cat, right? I predict that the reason why this hieroglyph exists is because 2,000 years ago, ancient Egyptians were worshiping cats like this, a cat god. That tells you the reasons why this is here, right? It explains it. But it's also a prediction of how the past was, right? So when I say that there's a conceptual distinction here, I don't mean that they have no overlap. Explanations are, I want to say always, but I'm going to be careful. Most times, predictions. Because maybe someone will find a counterexample or something, I don't know. But explanations are most times predictions. They are attempts to show what really happened, where we go from this archaeological data to a story. Why am I writing it sideways? A story of what happened. Right? Make sense? Explanation, prediction, they overlap, but they are conceptually distinct. Questions at this point in time? Comments?
Would you say that predictions are more distinguishable from explanations than explanations are from predictions?
Yeah, definitely. Because a prediction doesn't have to talk about reasons. Now, when you give the reasons why, typically you're going to say, I'm predicting these are really the reasons why. These are probably the reasons why. So yeah, I think my hunch is, but again, I haven't thought this through rigorously, and it's really easy to find counterexamples to stuff. All explanations are predictions. Not all predictions are explanations. But I'm not going to be dogmatic about that because I'm sure some weird philosopher will find a way to say, no, you're wrong. I don't know. Okay. Explanation, prediction, and that's how we answer. Now I'm giving you a broad overview, then we're going to dive into more details about each of these parts over the next few weeks. So let's say that I have an observation that produces a puzzling event, that produces question asking. I'll label this step question asking. I'll start to erase these arrows. Then I ask my questions, I go into the process of theorization. So I'm going to come up with explanations or predictions. What's after that? I have my explanations, I have my predictions.
You try to solve them or prove them?
So try to solve them and prove them. So why is it not enough just to give an explanation?
Because someone can always come up with another one.
So yeah, we've already kind of covered the proliferation problem, right? The explanation and prediction step, there are always at least a potentially infinite number of explanations and maybe predictions that are equally fit the evidence of the data. So we've got a problem. We don't just come up with an explanation and go, that's it, we did it, that's the right one. We have to look at all the competing explanations, right? And then choose which is the best one. So we have, our one step is proliferation of hypotheses, right? That's part of the theorization step. You proliferate and you come up with a bunch of hypotheses or predictions. And then after that, Sophia said you test, or you maybe confirm, is another word I'd use, or disconfirm. Let's talk about testing real quick, just in very broad brushstrokes, because of course, like I said, this is a broad, as you guys see, I'm modeling for you the process of inquiry. But each of these steps are going to be really complicated. We're going to have to dive into them a bit. So this is a broad overview again, this first day. But if I have testing, what does it mean to test a hypothesis, test a theory?
To have like a set of like variables or something that you put each hypothesis against.
A set of variables? I don't like the term variable, but I kind of get what you're getting at. What do you mean by variable?
I mean like questions that are the same.
Questions that are the same? I think, how would you compare a hypothesis with a question? Now, maybe what you're kind of intuitively getting at is, I have some hypothesis, I'm running out of room. Oh wait, I can write on this one, my camera's right back there. I have some hypothesis, let's say H1, I have a hypothesis H2, I have a hypothesis H3. And then I ask the question, which one is the best, or I ask, which one predicts the best? As in, which one has the most correct predictions? And now my variables or my data becomes, I draw out the predictions. Let's say H1 implies E1. H2 implies E1. H3 implies E2. Now I look for my data, and I see, I test, I experiment, as some naive people call it, and I try to figure out, well, do any of these E1, E2 happen? And I find, well, you know what, E1 happened, but when I looked in my lab, it doesn't just have to be the lab, when I looked around the world, I actually found that E2 was not true, it didn't happen. Now, if the theory H3 got me E2, implied E2, what's that say about the theory?
It's not.
Get rid of it. Testing just disconfirmed or invalidated that theory. Well, so E1 was true, but I'm still left with these two. Now, this counts in favor, right? Good job, these theories successfully made predictions, right? We have a body of data, of evidence, and we're subjecting the various hypotheses to the body of evidence or data. Is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah.
Sounds confident. Okay. Well, there's still the question of like, we've got to figure out how to choose between these two. We do more tests, we do more tests, we do more tests. We're ultimately, as I already explained in the human form of induction part, we're never going to be able to do this with testing. At the end of the day, there's always still going to be a potentially infinite number of hypotheses that are equally good, that survive testing equally well. We will also get into that in a separate class.
So, if you have something that happens and there's only one hypothesis, and you know that the E is true, that doesn't necessarily necessitate the hypothesis.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to cover this again in detail, but here's an example. If my wife says to me, Pierce, you're so irresponsible, that's her hypothesis about my character. It's a theory about a prediction about who I am. And then she says, you are so irresponsible, and that's why you never let the dogs out when I ask you to or do the dishes. And I said, I'm going to prove you wrong. We're going to test it. For next week, I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to be who I am, and we're going to see, am I really responsible, or are you just making this up, as always? And, well, it ends up turning out that after a week, she tallies up all the times I actually did the freaking dishes or let the dogs out when she asked me to, and I, like, 90% of the time just didn't do it. Does that mean, guaranteed she's right, I'm an irresponsible person? No, because maybe I was just stressed out that week. Maybe I had a class full of kids who went through their homework, which is not you guys. Maybe I had a bunch of students get COVID, I'm scared about something, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean, just because her theory predicted right, it doesn't mean that she's completely 100% with certainty correct. It does mean that's evidence that she's correct, right? But not knocked down 100% evidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So it just goes back to our rules, basically, because that would be like affirming the consequence.
Right. If hypothesis 1 says E happens, and we know E happens, how does that show that hypothesis 1 is true? But if hypothesis 1 says E happens and E doesn't happen, yeah, just do a nice little modus tollens there. That's why you have to learn deductive logic first. Maybe there's another way to teach it, but that's why I think you should learn deductive logic first, so you kind of get an idea. Well, but this does increase the probability of H1. It confirms it, but what you're starting to see is there are levels of probability, levels of confirmation. With deduction, it's a 0 or 1. It's a this is certain or this is uncertain, true or false. With probability, it's anywhere from 0 to 100%, right? So there's wiggle room. So it increases the probability, but can't do the deductive logic. That's why you need a separate probability logic to deal with this, which we will not learn because no one has really made a good one, uncontroversial one yet. Okay, but anyway, so far we've got inquiry, we have an observation, we get puzzled or confused, we ask a question, we move into the step of theory or theorization, which is answering those questions. And we either do explanations or predictions, and what we find is that we end up with a bunch and we can't decide which one is right. So we then do experiments or tests to try and narrow it down or prove which one's right. After those tests, we do something called IBE, or inference to the best explanation. And that is going to be the linchpin, the cornerstone of what we cover, so I'm not going to say too much about it now. But remember that I said you can prove as a matter of deductive logic that for any given data, there are an infinite number of explanations for that data that fit with the data equally well. Which means on a technical level, you're never actually going to be able to get rid of the proliferation problem. So you need something, you've narrowed it down as much as you can, and you're still stuck with at least 2 hypotheses that are competitors. How do you know which one is true? You do this little trick called inference to the best explanation, or IBE, and this has within this, there are other things that make a hypothesis probable, other than just evidence. Like Occam's razor, I don't know if you've heard of that, like simplicity, the simplest explanation is probably the correct one. That's Occam's razor. That's going to take all of our evidence, and it's going to take all of the things like simplicity, and it's going to weigh them all against each other, and it's going to say, almost like a messy algorithm, it spits out, boom, this is the best explanation. Right? Given our evidence and our testing, given the simplicity of each of the theories or hypotheses, the answers, one will hopefully emerge as the most probable or the best explanation out of the rest. Okay. Well, the problem is, of course, if it was that simple, if we could just come up with the best explanation, then science would already be complete, right? The problem is we're always working with limited evidence, with limited data, with limited hypotheses that we could think up, right? Because we don't actually think of an infinite number of hypotheses, but we know that we could. So even after we do inference to the best explanation, all we're really left with, the end result is some hypothesis is the best explanation out of its competition or competitors. Oh my god. How come I cannot spell? Competition, thank you, given our current knowledge or data. 5 seconds from now, you'll have more data. 10 years from now, you'll have a lot more data. Right? You're going to have to be redoing this constantly. You're going to have to be redoing inference to the best explanation, taking in the new data, sifting through, weighing it. Every time that your data set updates, you will have to repeat this entire process. And that's why the people say that years of science move slowly, right? Science is something that is a process over time with repeating loops, as you can see now. But it's not just science, it's philosophy, it's math, it's basically everything that's not directly provable by deduction or by simple argument. And you're just going to keep doing this until the end of time. We'll never really, unless maybe we die and go to heaven, God tells us all the answers, we're never really going to get this theory is the best theory out of any possible theory. It's the right one. It's always going to be, this is the best theory we have right now based on out of its competitors. So that's limited because it's only the ones we know about. And given our current knowledge. Which means this whole process, if you don't have to repeat 5 minutes from now, I have more data. That's the best, that really does seem to be the best that human beings can do. Pragmatists, analytic philosophers like myself, correspondence theorists about truth, the one thing we all agree on, even if we can't agree on truth, is that this, we never actually get, in the end, to perfect knowledge of the truth. It's always probabilistic, it's always tentative, it's always conditioned with this period of time. And that's why science has to progress, right? Okay, holy crap, man, I'm out of breath. This is the process of inquiry as I model it, as I conceive it. That's not just me. C.S. Peirce, whose last name is a lot like my first name, was a 19th to 20th century American philosopher. He's basically called the modern day Aristotle, the American Aristotle. He came up with this model, essentially. And since he came up with it, I've modified it a little bit. But his model essentially serves as the foundation of modern the modern study of inquiry theory and confirmation theory. So this is what you might call a modified Peircean model of inquiry. Maybe someday again, this is a model, this is an explanation of inquiry, right? It's a theory about a theory. What's that mean?
You reevaluate your attention.
Yeah, there may be new methods. There may be historical methods in science overlooked that I have not modeled here. This is the best I can do. I, with a clear conscience, can tell you, this is pretty much the best that anybody can do right now. Not because, I didn't like invent this. I'm just kind of communicating it. And it's very hard to find textbooks on this or books on this, or I would assign something not written by myself. But this is the best so far, the best theory, the best model we have.
So how does the paradigm of explanation fit into this?
Paradigm. So paradigm.
Oh.
It's okay. I just want to get clear because I'm going to say that word a lot and I want us to all understand. Yeah. So how does the paradigm of explanation as a part? Sorry, I didn't mean to embarrass you so much. She has nice arrows. No one bullied her. Explanation is part of this process, right? It's part of this process, and it kind of has so to understand in detail what explanation is, that paradigm of explanation I give is the logical structure of explanation. So it's like, think of this as a big process that you kind of have this kind of like idea of vaguely. I think if you just go through life knowing about this and you start realizing that you do this all the time, it starts to become clear that this is intuitive. But then if you want to really understand each of the parts and how they work and how they fit into the whole, that's where now the structure of explanation is going to be like this. Make sense? Is that what you're asking? Like, how does the paradigm of explanation fit into this?
Yeah, you answered it in a different way than I was expecting.
How were you expecting me to answer?
Well, sort of just relating back to your writing and like the exercises, just to give us, since we have like the section 1 exercises deal with it, just to get a more like non-theoretical, like more concrete example, I guess.
Yeah. There is no non-theoretical concrete example of explanation. It's one of those things that are so at the heart of what we do that only a philosopher can tell you about it. Scientists can show you them, particular examples, but it's a philosopher, a theorist, who's going to really tell you what it is. Right? So it's hard to say exactly, give you a concrete answer. The concrete answer that I do give, if you've done the book, so eventually this book will have an introduction that gives you this broad overview first, then goes into the details, because that part 1 I've given you starts with, from the bottom up, let's understand explanation and prediction, and then goes into proliferation, testing, IBE, and then concludes with getting into the big picture overall. But I'm introducing it now just for class, holistically first. So, for the homework, when I ask you something like, okay, here's a couple of different events and hypotheses and stories, I want you to come up with an explanation or hypothesis. The structure of explanation, which I call the paradigm of explanation, goes like this. You have your explanans, which are the parts of your story. I'm just going to call them explanans 1, explanans 2, explanans 3. And those explain the explanandum, which is in Latin, the thing, the thing to be explained. Right? And this is the structure I give, is that what an explanation is it's a hypothesis, right? Or a theory, or the explanation, or the story. That story is made of parts called explanants. Those explanants, when taken together in a big story or hypothesis, explain the explanandum. And I'll cover this in more detail next time, but let's say, again, the explanandum is, my car won't start. Fill in for me the explanans here that you think explain why the car won't start.
Does it have to be more than one?
No, so let's just, each of the different explanations of the stories, we're going to say they're different stories, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be more than one. It could be tiny, it could just be something like the battery is dead. I'll start off with that one. Let's say our first explanation literally just says, explanation 1, battery dead. Hypothesis 1. That fact alone may explain why the car won't start. Now you can unpack it and say, well, and if a battery's dead, then the car won't start, give all these other details in the story, right? And it's kind of relative how you're going to slice up exactly what's in the story and what's outside supporting the story. But we could say, hypothesis 1, the battery's dead, so the car won't start. That's what explains it. This does not mean horseshoe or arrow. It does not mean this implies this. It just means this explains this. And when you do the reading, you'll find that each prong of this arrow actually represents something. I won't talk about it now. Okay, so hypothesis 1, the battery is dead, so that explains the car won't start. Someone give me another one.
The rats chew through the wire.
Okay, rats. Right, the rats chew through the wires between the starter and the ignition switch. Well, that would explain car won't start, right? Someone give me another one.
You don't have the key.
I'm already here.
There's 2 of them.
Hello, my friend. Well, the janitor is going to have to come in. He's faded enough, I can write over him. You don't have the key, or let's say, not the right key, right? So that, yeah, it's not going to start because you can't turn it. That explains why car won't start, right? Give me another one.
Well, what would one with like 2 explanans look like?
Well, so if you read the chapter, some of these can even be construed as having multiple parts. Like, again, the battery is dead. If the car's battery is dead, it will start, etc. Right? Hypothesis. So yeah. So let's maybe give me a fuller story with more details here.
It's sort of like with what we were doing before, like how you can, like the commutative step, you can kind of sometimes leave that out.
What do you mean?
Like how we condense it into just one explanans.
Right. Yeah. There's a complicated question that I'm not even sure what to make of. Is that this arrow means this is relevant to this. This explains this, or is the reason. This is the reason why this happens. If I say rats chew through the wire, and I have out here the details, if rats chew through the wire, then the car won't start. Is that really within this, or is it part of the arrow? It doesn't really matter whether we put the extra details in here or here. You know, it doesn't matter so much. Yeah. But give me, before we go, what time is it? 2:43. Okay, we're almost out of time. We got 2 minutes. Give me 1 or 2 more explanations with more steps.
You went out drinking last night, and then the breathalyzer in your car won't let you turn on your car?
Oh, nice. Personal experience?
Yeah.
No,
I'm kidding.
Alright, so let's just say, I was drinking last night. Now, here's a perfect, this is actually a great illustration. I'm gonna update the book with this. You're drinking last night. If you know your background information, that's a good explanation for why your car won't start. So just that fact is itself a hypothesis why the car won't start. But normally we would want to fill it out to get more details, like there's a breathalyzer in the car, right? And if there's a breathalyzer, then if I drink, then the car won't start. We can start getting logic in there too. And then all of these taken together imply that the car won't start. Or support or explain why the car won't start. Make sense?
Could you also just, like, instead of just having I was drinking last night, could you put, like, I'm a breathalyzer in the car, and that be, like, the only one, and then the rest of them kind of be, like, prior knowledge?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Now, the best explanations will probably include all of that within the big story. But stories aren't simple things. They have parts, and they explain the parts. So it's kind of relative, and I'm not really sure exactly what the philosophical impact of exactly how we model our explanations will work. Okay. Questions, comments, anything?
I'm just wondering, is that a thing, like cars that have breathalyzers?
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel like put in, there's some cars now that I think there's an alternate in. I don't know.
Yeah, but if you have
I think some old cars.
if you have a DUI or DWI,
I see
like,
people on TikTok posting about it, like, you know where they can't go.
yeah, or they have to like